Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are here to take your stack of research, the articles, the notes, the theories you need to digest, and distill them into the most important, engaging nuggets of knowledge.
Today, we are strapping in for what is perhaps our most provocative and unconventional deep dive yet. We are exploring the fundamental mechanics of human attraction.
Specifically, we're contrasting the signals we send versus the signals we are, hardwired to receive.
And our sources for this are, well, they're highly specific. They're drawn from the observational research of an independent scholar.
Right. It's a set of excerpts titled Bodies and Resumes, What Makes Us Horny. And this author, he decided that if you really want to understand core, fundamental biological impulses, you can't just stay in a sterile lab.
No, you can't. Sometimes you have to go right to the source.
And for him, the source was the fashion show floor and the bachelor party VIP room.
Precisely. So our mission today is to really unpack this author's unified theory of attraction. And it all hinges on this critical dichotomy.
On one side, you've got the physical display of genetic fitness. That's what he calls bodies.
And on the other, you have the abstract symbols of capacity, of resource control, of status.
The resumes.
The resumes, exactly.
And the core idea we're going to explore is really crucial. It drives all of his observations. Attraction, at its root, is about signaling successful genetic fitness.
Right. But the mechanism, the way that signal is successfully transmitted and, maybe more importantly, received, that differs drastically between the genders.
And this contrast, it leads to some, deeply funny, but also profoundly insightful conclusions.
It creates a fascinating, almost paradoxical system in human mate selection. It's this dual mechanism system. And understanding that paradox is, I think, key to understanding our own social and, mating impulses.
Okay, let's unpack this. But before we can even get to the field research, we have to start where the author himself had to start.
Yeah, defending his right to even ask the question in the first place.
Exactly. We're starting with the authority problem itself.
Absolutely, because when you step outside that traditional academic structure and you start to, pontificate on subjects as sensitive as biological differences.
Especially attraction.
Especially attraction. You have to be ready for that challenge. People are going to ask, who are you to talk about this?
And the author, being an independent scholar and, let's be honest, a noted smart aleck, he addresses this head on.
He does. He references a specific piece of fan mail, which sounds more like an angry memo, really, that kind of sets the tone for this whole discussion about his lack of formal training.
The question was incredibly blunt, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. And I think it's worth quoting because it just perfectly encapsulates the institutional resistance he was up against. It was, by what authority do you pontificate about the biological differences in men's and women's behavior, you sexist?
Oh.
And he gets asked this all the time, but for him, the question itself is revealing.
How so?
Well, it implies that only people with some kind of institutional blessing, some formal credential, are allowed to even speak on these matters.
And that's the whole crux of his argument for being an independent scholar in the first place. He tells this great story about crashing a scientist party in Berkeley.
Right, Berkeley, the ultimate intellectual crucible. And he finds himself there, just some guy challenging and debating PhDs and postdocs about really complex subjects like genetics.
He describes pushing these arguments to what he calls sublime heights of pomposity.
Which is such a great phrase.
It is, like insisting that the human genome is analogous to a novel, this linear digital alphabet whose code creates life.
Which is actually a pretty useful analogy. It frames DNA not just as some, chemical soup, but as highly complex, targeted information storage.
It's a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
But as he points out, his intellectual swagger only got him so far. Eventually, some smart aleck postdoc, the inevitable gatekeeper, finally asked him the one question he was dreading.
Do you have any credentials?
Exactly, the question that stops the conversation.
And that leads us into this glorious, detailed account of what he calls his anti-credential background. He uses it almost like a shield.
He's totally upfront about it. He just admits, no, I'm just some guy. He studied literature. He minored in the development of Western civilization at Providence College.
And these weren't just any professors teaching him. He notes he was taught, in part, by Dominican priests.
Who, he says, had no sense of humor when it came to my biological observations about celibacy.
I can only imagine. But that detail is key, right? His academic foundation isn't quantitative modern science. It's classical liberal arts. It's about foundational human thought, about narrative.
And this unique foundation led to him graduating, in his own charming admission, at the top of the bottom 10th of his class.
Which is just perfect. This is not a man bragging about his grades. He's bragging about the intellectual freedom he gained by, avoiding that rat race entirely.
He makes this dry comment that, while this might not seem like a huge accomplishment to those PhD scientists he was arguing with,
Yeah.
among his friends, he was considered the academic heavyweight.
That's brilliant. It instantly establishes his frame of reference. It's completely outside the traditional academic hierarchy, which gives him a license for this kind of unconventional thinking.
And then came the brief but pivotal detour into the world of formalized, high-status training law school.
Right. He attended for just 1 year.
Before, as he puts it, he was kicked out for smartassery.
But he reframes it so beautifully. He says he only lost 1/3 of his soul.
Which is just enough to function in a capitalist economy.
It's just classic. The entire narrative is a performance. It's designed to challenge this institutional belief that expertise has to be certified.
He's suggesting that formal training, especially in a field as structured as law, can actually stifle the kind of direct, unvarnished observation you need to really understand human biology.
But this isn't just about him rejecting credentials for the sake of it. There's a crucial element here that gives his research some real gravity, and that's his commitment to self-education.
That's the key part. He didn't just walk away from formal learning. He dove headfirst into this rigorous, self-directed scholarship.
He invested the royalties from his novel
Novel royalty.
into reading evolutionary biology studies
Yeah.
full-time
Yeah.
for 7 straight years.
Can you imagine? That is a monumental, self-funded deep dive. He basically created his own highly focused PhD program in human ethology and evolutionary psychology.
And that level of dedication, it turns a lack of a credential into a badge of honor. He suggests that he had to absorb the entire body of knowledge, not just some niche specialty you'd need for a PhD, to truly grasp the whole picture of human behavior.
And the punchline that comes after this massive intellectual undertaking is just priceless.
What's that?
He finally felt ready to ask a woman on a date.
You're kidding.
7 years of full-time, self-directed research just to feel adequately informed about the basic dynamics of human interaction.
Wow. That is the ultimate statement on the complexity of intersexual signaling. But let's step back and address the critique here. Can we really trust a methodology that was developed by someone who, spent a year in law school and 7 years reading books in his living room?
It's the necessary question. Because formal science, it requires peer review, statistical rigor, all of that.
And what the author is doing, it isn't classical social science. It's something else. It's more like ethological field observation.
The study of human behavior in its natural setting.
Exactly. We have to accept his frame. He's positioning himself as the quintessential independent scholar, the Renaissance man who believes that institutionalized education can sometimes interfere with basic learning.
By prioritizing data over direct experience.
Right. His lack of formal training, he argues, is what allowed him to see these patterns without the filter of academic dogma getting in the way.
And because he lives in Berkeley, the absolute capital of academic credentials, he can constantly challenge these intellectuals to debate.
Which he seems to enjoy.
Oh, he loves it. But he admits, he still prays they don't ask for that piece of paper, that certification.
And that tension, the self-aware lack of certification, but coupled with this intense, dedicated self-study, it kind of justifies the unconventional nature of the research we're about to dive into.
He had to invent his own lab.
And that lab turned out to be the chaotic real-world theater of human sexuality.
Which brings us directly to his first major field study. His claim is that he performed direct scientific research, even if, as he says, people tend to laugh when he explains his methodology.
And his primary observation takes place in the most unlikely and maybe therefore the most revealing setting imaginable.
A men's clothing fashion showcase.
It's the perfect, unromantic setting for this. He was working minimum wage, running the lights and sound. He's the literal observer behind the scenes.
And crucially, the audience for this one-night-only fashion show was composed only of females.
That detail provides such an important control. It's a purely observational study of the female reaction to male display without any, male-to-male competitive stuff going on.
Which can totally distort the results.
Absolutely. So there he is, running the lights and the dope beats, as he calls them, while these peak specimen male models, these hunks, are strutting on stage.
The models went through all the standard categories you'd expect. Casual wear, out about town, winter wear, clothes that communicate utility and success in daily life.
But the critical segment came first. The displays of pure, unadulterated bodies.
And this is where his observations just fundamentally contradict the expected narrative, the idea that raw visual physical attraction is the primary trigger for women.
So how did the women react? You have these incredibly fit, physically perfect men displaying their bodies. What happened?
He notes they acted like scientists.
Scientists.
Yeah, emotionally detached, intellectually assessing the merchandise.
Detachment is the key word there. He describes the initial reactions as frowning in puzzlement, sighing unromantically.
The occasional yawn.
A yawn at a male model showcase.
Yeah. He said the atmosphere was, and this is quote, lively as a lab room in there. His spectacular light shows, his dope beats, none of it could inject any sexual spice into the environment.
That non-reaction is so significant. It suggests that the raw, immediate signal of physical fitness, the body in isolation, it just wasn't an effective high-arousal trigger in this context.
It was being assessed clinically, not emotionally.
And this indifference, it extended even to the peak moment of physical display.
The swimwear portion.
Right. The models walk in swimwear, and the ultimate test was the thong display, showing off what he delicately calls serious cheekage.
And the result?
Scattered giggles.
Not a riot, not a frenzy.
Just a few nervous titters.
Think about that from an evolutionary standpoint. This is the optimal, unfiltered genetic advertisement. You've got clear markers of health, youth, strength.
And yet the audience is detached, professional, almost bored. It's a really remarkable finding. It suggests female arousal requires some kind of filter or a context that goes beyond just the physique.
It sets up the paradox perfectly. Peak physical display achieves minimal arousal. But then came the turning point.
The single event that flipped the entire dynamic. The author describes it as a transition from laboratory cool to primal chaos.
The models left the stage for a moment, and then they came back out. In the author's words, then these guys marched out in power suits.
And the change was
Instantaneous, violent, utterly explosive. The scientific detachment just vanished.
the women went ape.
That's his phrase for it. He says he witnessed something approaching a simultaneous group orgasm that lasted about 5 minutes.
We have to linger on the details of this chaos because this is where the observational rigor for his theory comes from. This wasn't just, enthusiastic clapping.
No, this was a breakdown of social order. He said the stage was partially rushed. Fire lane regulations, the actual rules of civilized society, were being ignored.
The noise level just spiked to uncontrollable heights, and he noted that senior matrons, women you'd expect to be dignified and composed,
We're acting like schoolgirls at an NSYNC concert.
that comparison is crucial. The reaction wasn't intellectual anymore. It was guttural, overwhelming, it was primal. And the only difference was the clothing.
High-end, tailored clothing.
He said the chaos was so intense, he wondered if he needed to call the riot police.
And people were throwing things onto the stage. Not flowers, but personal effects.
Purse items were thrown, lipstick, keys, a compact mirror maybe? These are symbols of their own civilized composure, just being discarded in the face of this overwhelming display.
The contrast is just unbelievably stark.
Yeah.
The sight of a genetically perfect male body in a thong gets a yawn and some giggles.
But the sight of that same body wrapped in expensive tailored wool, that causes a 5-minute frenzy of social collapse.
Okay, so let's get to the critical question he raises himself.
Yeah.
How could stupid manufactured clothes be more sexually arousing than the actual living, breathing, butt-thonged hunk of a man?
It seems irrational, but only if you assume the primary driver of attraction is a purely visual assessment of short-term genetic fitness. This observation points directly to the theory that for women, attraction is driven not by the pure physical form alone, but by symbols of status, capacity, and resource control.
The resume.
The resume. The power suit is an instant, high-fidelity signal. It communicates competence, wealth accumulation, social navigation skills, the capacity for resource generation.
And it overrides the primal physical display because it speaks to a much more enduring form of genetic fitness, one that ensures the survival and success of any potential offspring.
It's the difference between looking at an animal who seems strong and looking at an animal who has successfully built a massive, defensible territory full of resources. The latter is a much more reliable, long-term security signal.
So in the modern context, the suit is that reliably signaled territory.
Precisely.
Now that observation is powerful enough on its own. But as the author himself stresses, to be a rigorous scientist, he needed a control group.
He needed a way to cross-check these findings against the male arousal mechanism.
And this is what led him to his next field of study.
He became a dedicated observer of bachelor parties.
Purely as a scientific experiment, of course.
Of course.
And his findings in this male control environment were, well, they were clear, direct, and they provided the perfect contrast to the complexity of the fashion show.
They confirmed the body theory perfectly. Male arousal, he found, correlated precisely with the stages of female disrobal.
So if the power suit is the height of symbolic status for men,
Then female disrobal is the height of direct physical fitness display, the unadorned body.
the male response is primal and direct. Men are responding to genetic fitness as it's manifested in bodies. The progressive unveiling of that body tracks directly, predictably, with the increase in arousal.
No status symbols needed to kickstart the system.
What's truly fascinating, though, and where we have to slow down and just appreciate the author's style, is his meticulous and highly humorous approach to scientific measurement.
Right. Since he couldn't use traditional instruments, he devised his own specific non-traditional metrics for tracking male arousal.
These details are what make the research so memorable. The first metric he tracked was jaw slackitude.
Jaw slackitude. It's such a wonderful term. He defined it as the amount of hang time the lower mandible had during the viewing process.
You can just picture it, can't you? It's a physical, measurable loss of muscular tension. The jaw literally goes slack because the higher cognitive functions, they've been temporarily suspended.
The parts of your brain responsible for holding your face in a structured thinking expression are otherwise occupied.
We're talking observable physics here. The chin dropping, the mouth slightly open, a look of just sublime, nonverbal engagement.
His next metric was the paucity of eye blinks.
The fewer blinks, the higher the arousal.
Again, it's a basic biological necessity being overridden by the intensity of the visual stimulus. The brain is just demanding uninterrupted data acquisition. Don't blink, don't miss anything.
And then, of course, the lengths of tongue waggliness.
Which we can only assume is a precursor to some kind of vocalization, or maybe just an involuntary motor function related to anticipation.
It's the limbic system just completely overriding the social inhibition of the frontal lobe.
And my personal favorite, the metric that truly elevates this research into the realm of comparative biology.
The impulse to yell woo in a feminine falsetto.
Which he scientifically likened to the mating cry of the Siamang gibbon.
We have to unpack the gibbon comparison. Siamang gibbons are known for these spectacular booming calls. They use them for territory, for attracting mates.
So the woo in a falsetto, this sudden, high-pitched, nonverbal vocalization, is essentially a human male regressing to a simpler, more primal communication system.
The brain is bypassing complex human language. It's resorting to a sudden, loud, contextually appropriate outburst of pure, uncontrolled excitement.
These observational metrics allowed him to confirm that direct physical trigger in the male cohort.
But the most profound finding, the one that really tells us what's happening inside the male brain during this process, is what he called the eye-gogliosity ratio.
Precisely. He discovered that this eye-gogliosity ratio was found to be inversely proportional to the correct use of syntax.
So in other words, the wider and more intently focused the eyes become,
the less coherent the speech and sentence structure becomes. The complex architecture of language and rational thought just collapses.
which leads to his interpretation. The intensity of the body signal causes a rapid flow of blood away from the higher neocortex brain functions towards some as yet unknown organ.
In layman's terms, the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that does planning, judgment, language, is temporarily starved of resources.
It's the ultimate short circuit. The resume function of the brain, the ability to analyze and critique and articulate, is functionally disabled when the body signal is received at maximum intensity.
Now, we do have to address the critical question here. Can we really trust data that's gathered via jaw slackitude and the Siamang gibbon cry, especially since the researcher himself admits he got distracted?
It's a fair challenge. He notes that further scientific measurements became untenable because he got distracted, and he had to attend many such events to cross-check his findings. A true sacrifice for science.
It is. But that admission of distraction, in a way, it actually lends credibility to his interpretation.
How so?
The fact that the researcher himself, who was trying to be rigorous, was repeatedly derailed by the overwhelming biological stimuli, it confirms the power of the body signal to override high-level thought processes.
His own distraction becomes a data point.
Exactly. His data is the qualitative description of that overriding impulse, which he observed repeatedly over multiple trials. The control group confirms it. For men, the body signal is direct, overwhelming, and results in a temporary cognitive shutdown.
Okay, Here's where it gets really interesting. We've now established two perfectly observed yet diametrically opposed environments.
Yeah, the fashion show where the resume, the suit, caused a 5-minute riot.
And you have the bachelor party where the body, the disrobal, caused the linguistic shutdown.
So we now have the necessary evidence to synthesize the unified theory. The author felt ready, finally, late in life, as most men do, he says, to present his findings to the scientific community.
And his conclusion is so elegant because it connects these disparate observations through the single lens of genetic fitness signaling.
For men, the arousal trigger is direct and immediate. Men are responding to displays of genetic fitness as manifested in bodies.
This is immediate visual assessment. They're calculating fertility, health, youth, the factors essential for successful reproduction. It's a very clear signal, but it also has a high risk of short-term decay. Bodies change.
Right. And for women, the trigger is indirect. It's symbolic. It's abstracted. Women were responding to displays of genetic fitness as manifested in symbols of status.
The power suits, the resumes.
The suit itself isn't inherently sexy. It's the meaning it conveys that's the arousal trigger. It's a reliable proxy signal for wealth, stability, competence, social control, and resource acquisition.
Let's delve into the evolutionary cost-benefit analysis here for a second. Why this fundamental difference?
Well, female investment in reproduction is immense. You're talking pregnancy, lactation, years of vulnerable childcare.
So their mate selection must prioritize factors that guarantee long-term success and survival of the offspring, not just peak short-term genetic quality.
A male with a perfect body might be the most fertile, but if he lacks the capacity for resource generation or social navigation, the resume, he represents a high liability.
And the fashion show confirmed that the female cohort subconsciously prioritized the signal of sustained capacity over the signal of raw physical excellence.
The power suit signals stability. It implies the wearer can navigate complex social hierarchies, handle financial pressure, and provide reliable protection against external threats, be they economic or physical.
These complex forms of genetic fitness, all packaged in tailored wool.
This is the power of abstraction in intersexual selection. Status, competence, wealth. These are enduring traits, or at least they last longer than peak muscle tone or youthful symmetry.
So the resume signal serves as this reliable, non-physical proxy for successful fitness that, as the fashion show demonstrated, fundamentally outweighs the pure physical display as an initial, powerful arousal trigger.
It does.
But let's challenge this idea for a moment. Isn't a fit man in a suit the ultimate signal? Surely the audience wasn't thinking these were all sickly millionaires.
That's a really important point of nuance. The author acknowledges that the models were physically fit. Of course they were. But the key finding is that the body signal was only translated into a high arousal event when it was packaged with the resume signal.
So the body is the raw material.
But the resume is the multiplier. The suit amplifies the inherent value of the man to the point where it causes a loss of cognitive control, similar to the primal reaction we saw in the male control group.
It takes a man from being just a strong specimen to being a successful provider and protector.
It's the difference between finding an excellent genetic code and finding an excellent genetic code that also guarantees socioeconomic security.
And the author's practical takeaway from his 7 years of research in his field studies is so immediate and self-deprecating.
Which is?
If you want to impress the ladies,
Hmm.
maybe putting on some nice clothes isn't so stupid.
And most hilariously, he makes a personal commitment right there based on his own scientific findings. He says, I'm losing the thong.
He tested the efficacy of the direct physical display versus the status display, and he concluded that the high-level resume signal is the unequivocal winner in the female attraction economy.
He did the research.
So we've taken quite a journey today. We started with an expelled law student debating PhDs in Berkeley,
Moved through 7 years of self-funded evolutionary reading.
and culminated in the unholy convergence of fashion shows and bachelor parties as the ultimate research labs.
We've confirmed this deep contrast that's inherent in the human mating system. Our deep dive showed that attraction is a dual mechanism system. The male system is triggered by immediate physical display, which results in those quantifiable metrics of jaw slackitude and the shutdown of the neocortex.
While the female system is triggered by the high-level signaling of capacity and resource control, the status, the resume, and that results in a profound, emotional, and socially chaotic response when that abstract signal is successfully received.
The author's strength, I think, lies in his willingness to observe these unfiltered primal reactions outside of a controlled environment. He demonstrated that the power of the resume signal is strong enough to cause a cognitive, almost uncontrollable reaction in the female audience.
It mirrored the intensity of the physical reaction he saw in the male control
Yeah,
group.
exactly. It proves our biology has evolved these powerful responses to symbols of abstract success.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? It means our deepest biological impulses are often triggered not by the raw material of the person, the body, but by what the cultural context and abstract symbols, the resume, convey about their capacity to navigate a complex, resource-driven world.
Sometimes a simple, well-tailored power suit is a far more potent biological signal than displaying serious cheekage.
The final conclusion of this observational research is that while men might be hardwired to prioritize the immediate visual signal of reproductive fitness, the body women are hardwired to prioritize the enduring signal of social and material success, the resume.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider as you wrap up this deep dive. The author's research was done in an era where the resume was clearly signaled by, tailored clothing, by physical presence, by established wealth.
But if the ultimate signal of fitness in our hypermodern complex society has shifted so decisively towards abstract status, the capacity to command resources and attention, how has that moved from valuing physical strength to valuing cognitive and digital capacity? How has that changed our species' definition of the ideal mate?
Specifically, what happens when that status is purely digital or ephemeral? If the power suit signaled reliability and material stability in the 1990s, what does a huge verified follower count on a social platform signal now?
What about a successful but maybe volatile crypto portfolio?
Oh.
Or the ability to manipulate complex, non-physical systems?
Is a verified checkmark the new silk tie? Is a successful DAO launch the equivalent of the senior matrons throwing their purse items in a frenzy? The biological impulse, it remains constant, but the symbols change.
It's something to mull over the next time you decide what to wear or what abstract status symbols you choose to value when signaling fitness to the world.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
We'll see you next time.